Good evening, and welcome to a rather special little mini-series for special features, looking back at some of the Halloween offerings we've had down the many years. And tonight we're starting off with, I wouldn't say it's a favourite of mine, but it is a guilty pleasure. We're going to be looking at the 2010 remake of the 1941 movie classic, The Wolfman. Now, originally in the 1940s, they got Lon Chaney Jr. to play the title character and his alter ego, Lawrence Talbot. Now, with that movie, that was shot and set in the same year as it was made, 1941. But with the remake, they decided to do things a little bit differently and actually set it in the late 19th century, which gives it a slightly darker feel and, you know, a very good period to actually set the movie in. And when you get a cast like Sir Anthony Hopkins, Hugo Weaving of The Matrix and Transformers fame, and Benicio del Toro, who's been known for playing Che Guevara in Che, Part 1 and Part 2, and, to my understanding, the youngest Bond villain ever to date in The Living Daylights. And if I'm incorrect, there's the comment section below. You have your right to use it. But tonight, specifically, he will be playing Lawrence Talbot. Now, it's an interesting dynamic whereby Lawrence has had a history of mental imbalances, shall we say, as a child, and he ends up going to America to live with his auntie, which then sort of ties in nicely to the story why he's sporting an American accent. Now, Lon Chaney Jr. was the American coming in from the original movie, but it's difficult in places to get an actor to put on an accent when they're not actually from that country. The best example I can give of this, think the 2008 Incredible Hulk reboot, where Tim Roth's Emil Blonsky is born in Russia but raised in England. So it's like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. And so Lawrence is given a message from Ms. Gwen Conliffe, played by Emily Blunt. To be fair, I don't necessarily think she was terrible per se, but I do think she could have been given better material to work with, as I felt she kind of came across as a bit bland and a bit wooden in this movie, but that is my merely humble opinion. Anthony Hopkins is well known for chewing the scenery up in almost any movie. I mean, he did the same as Professor Abraham von Helsing in Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, and he does the same thing here as Sir John Talbot, father to Lawrence Talbot. Now, from what I understand from the early 41 movie, they didn't really play too much with the father-son dynamic story with that, but this one, they do make a little bit more of it. And then, as I say, Lawrence gets a message from Gwen Conliffe that his brother, Ben, has gone missing. And been missing for quite a while. A month, shall we say. And he ends up coming down to the fictitious place of Blackmore. If it is in fact a real place, please, again, comment section below. And Lawrence comes along, meets up again with his father, and there's this icy, distant presence and tension between the two, like Sir John doesn't give a crap, and Lawrence, via the same token, is not exactly all, you know, bubbly to see his father.
Lo and behold, prodigal son returns.
Hello, Father.
And considering how distant he was as a child to him, it kind of stands to reason. Hugo Weaving, I honestly think, steals the show in this. Now, here's the thing with Hugo Weaving. Why can he not stay away from these villainous type roles? Now, with this one, with his role as Inspector Abelard, Francis Aberline from Scotland Yard, which is actually based off Frank Aberline, who, according to history, was actually the policeman in charge of the Jack the Ripper case from the late 19th century. But for artistic license and script purposes, they had to play around with the name a little bit. And although Hugo Weaving, like I say, he's not really the villain per se, he does come across that way in some aspect. With Benicio del Toro, this was a movie he had been waiting to work on for the better part of his life, because he grew up watching the classic horror movies from the 40s, 50s. He loved Boris Karloff as Frankenstein, and he liked Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. It was just, you know, this was his passion project. This is something he wanted to work on. And I remember the guys over at Spill.com actually saying that he was horribly miscast in this. I think he was, and he wasn't, to a point. He knows how to do this sort of, there's this messed up feeling inside of him. And this also goes back to where there's this mental imbalance, because his profession in this movie is, he is a Shakespearean actor on the stage. And if you're a guy that's had a little bit of mental instability in a story, whereby you play various different people, if you've had that kind of background, it's almost like putting on a perfect handmade glove that's just made just for you. And this is one of the things that Aberline brings across, saying, you know, of all these characters that you play on the stage, what else is lurking in your head? And one of the things they wanted to try and say with this movie is it the bite that puts the animal into you, or is it the bite that allows to whatever's lurking inside you to reveal themselves? It's an interesting, and that's a sort of an interesting sort of duality, you know, what does lurk beneath the surface, you know, is what you know is in our psyche that we don't know about. This, and Emily Blunt, remember her saying something like the loss of control, the wanting to not have any rules or boundaries. Story-wise, now I remember this movie getting a lot of flack when it was released 3 years ago, and pretty much everybody else has been kind of narking on it since. In terms of the special effects and the prosthetic makeup, it's very well done, because Rob Baker, I believe that's the prosthetic makeup artist who also worked on An American Werewolf in London in the early 1980s, he did for this movie what was done for the early 40s movie, which was having the hair glued onto people rather than using a CG creature. And I think the only time CG was ever used was just for the transformation scenes. Not to say that it couldn't be done prosthetically today, but considering CG probably is a little bit more cost effective, then it comes as a, you know, it gets across to you as a no-brainer that they would go this way. But as Del Toro's performance as Talbot, he deals with this sort of scenario that he's not really a predator. He is a victim of an illness. That's how he treats his affliction when his father, who is the werewolf that curses him with this affliction, he treats this as, this is not something I wanted, this is something that I was unfortunately burdened with. You know, it's an affliction, it's an ailment, it's an illness. And he sort of goes to these deep places where it's like, what did I do? You know, what has become of me? And again, it's almost like the sense of the animal is a different psyche, it's a different consciousness. Think of it, if you will, as if the body is like a vehicle or a machine. The normal guy will punch out, and then somebody will punch in and basically uses it for as they see fit for. in a weird kind of way, but it does kind of make sense. The rest of the cast, okay, nothing really notable. Did get the sense whenever they did have the transformations or the wolf scenes, they wanted to make it seem impactful, you know, and this is the weirdest thing. For a werewolf movie, this was only rated certificate 15. In the States, that's probably PG-17, if there is such a certificate. I could be wrong. But this wasn't as scary and as gory as I was expecting, because American Werewolf in London in 1980, I remember in 95, just before New Year's Eve, I was scared witless of this as a 14-year-old. And then I get to New Year's Eve, 1999, I see it and I'm like, I'm scared of this. Wow. But then again, your perception as a younger person is vastly different to how you are when your mind has matured into an adult. But in terms of rewatch value, I'd say this movie is okay. It's not the greatest horror movie I've ever seen, and the honour of that belongs to movies like Bram Stoker's Dracula or 1999's The Mummy. Although that one's a little more family friendly, I have the, how should I put this, the theory that it's what you don't see that makes your mind work into overtime and gets you thinking. It's like, and a couple of examples, like I say, The Mummy is one of them. And in some weird way, you could, and in another way, you can also bring Jurassic Park into this, because when you hear things that are happening off camera, you sort of think, what just happened? Again, it's what you don't see that could be as equally scary, if not scarier, because you have no concept or idea of what is going on. But for part one of After Dark, The Wolfman 2010 gets a somewhat satisfactory loner. I went to see this in the pictures about 3 years ago, and you know, I felt like I got my money's worth from it. Is it worth shelling out on the spot? If you like your horror movies, you'll probably enjoy this anyway. If you're the squeamish type, leave it be. But if you're someone like me who likes a bit of everything in moderate doses, then if you happen to see this one on the shelf going for £10 or $10 in the US, then I would at least give this a look. Because some people, like I say, have narked on this movie. I don't think it deserved all the negative criticism it got. That's just my opinion. But for me, it's just okay. It's watchable. It's enjoyable. Is it as good, like I say, as some of the other horror movies I mentioned? No. Again, just my opinion. Well, I shall see you in part 2 of After Dark, where we go to 1920s Egypt with Stephen Sommers' The Mummy, that also put Brendan Fraser's career on the map. Until then, good day.